Good evening, YouTube. Welcome back to the channel. This is IMAX Sports, another football video, and today I'm going over my Week 13 Power Rankings for the 2024 NFL season. Week 13 is nearly upon us, which means that we are 2/3 of the way through the season. It's crazy that we are so far in, but we're starting to really see what each of these teams are. We're starting to see which teams are going to be coming on strong late in the season, and which teams are really not sure what they are yet, even this far into the year. So let's get right into it. First off, we have the dumpster fire. We have the Raiders at 32. We have the Giants at 31. We have the Panthers at 30. We have the Jaguars at 29. We have the Patriots at 28. The Panthers are the only team in the dumpster fire to put up a decent week this week. They had a decent showing against Kansas City. They were able to almost bring the game into overtime. They were not quite able to do that. Patrick Mahomes had a game-winning drive, and the Chiefs were able to win 30-27. It was a very close game. Carolina really gave them a run for their money, and I thought that the Panthers were going to have a decent chance of winning, but they did not. The Raiders got cooked, and so did the Giants. The Raiders actually had a pretty okay game against the Broncos. The Broncos are a solid team. The Raiders are not, and so they played well. It was a good divisional game. They were at home, but they were not able to get the victory. And then the Giants and the Patriots got absolutely demolished. The Giants lost 30-7, and the Patriots actually were able to give the Dolphins a run for their money towards the end of the game. They took Tua out early with 11 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. After that happened, their backup running back fumbled the football. The Patriots got a fumble recovery for a touchdown, and we were able to get a stop, but unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be, and it quickly went from a 2-score game to a 3-score game, and the Patriots were unable to get back into it. So, this is our dumpster fire for this week. The Jaguars did not play in this week. Mac Jones is their quarterback. That's why the Patriots are still currently above them. If Trevor Lawrence was the quarterback, they'd be at 28 instead of 29. But for right now, I think 29 is a fair spot. Moving on to the quarterback questions, we got the Jets at 27. We got the Titans at 26. We got the Browns at 25. And we got the Saints at 24. The Saints did not play this week. They are on bye, so they stayed pretty much in the same spot. The Browns with Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston has now beat 2 top teams in the league. They're both divisional games, and divisional games in the AFC North are basically toss-ups. You could be the best team in the league or the worst team in the league, and divisional game in the AFC North is basically a toss-up every single week. With that being said, Jameis Winston has beaten the Ravens and the Steelers, which are 2 of the best teams in the league. Right? The Ravens and the Steelers are 2 of the most consistent teams in the league every single year, and this year they are 2 of the top teams that people were thinking were going to be going pretty far before the Browns beat them. The Browns only have 3 wins on the season. 2 of them are to the Ravens and the Steelers. It was a strong win from the Browns. Jameis Winston had a great game. The Steelers almost came back, almost were able to get the victory, but the Browns were able to hold on towards the end of the game. The Titans beat the Texans this week, another divisional game that went haywire for the team that was expected to win. Tennessee has now beaten a couple of pretty terrible teams. They beat the Dolphins without Tua. They beat the Patriots, but now they have added the Texans to their list of teams that they've beaten. Cleveland retains the spot above them because they have beaten 2 top teams as opposed to the Titans beating a Texans team that's been wavering recently. So the Browns with Jameis Winston are a better team than the Titans with Malik Willis, but all of the quarterbacks, with Will Levis, but all the quarterbacks in this tier have been having questionable seasons. Will Levis had his best game of the season by far. He had a phenomenal week after being in and out with Malik Willis, and now it seems like he might potentially be able to continue the starting position next year. I don't think that he will. I think that the Titans will be looking for a new opportunity, but Will Levis played a great game today against the Houston Texans defense. As for the Jets were on bye this week. Aaron Rodgers is still confused. He's trying to blame everybody else. He is also supposedly not going to be on the Jets next year. That news just came out, so there's a lot going on in New York, but the Jets are not looking like they're in a good situation right now. Moving on to falling down, we got the Bears at 23, the Colts at 22, the Cowboys at 21, the Buccaneers at 20, and the Bengals at 19. Yes, the Cowboys and Buccaneers did both win this week, but as a whole, they are falling down in the rankings. The Bears are at 23. The Bears start off very strong. They started off over 500. I believe they were 4-3 at some point. They may have been even 4-2. But once they started playing teams in their division, once they started playing decent teams, they started losing almost every single game. This week with Caleb Williams, they had a pretty decent showing against the Vikings. They were able to come back and tie up the game, bring it to overtime, but the Vikings were able to secure the victory. Caleb Williams had a very strong game. It was one of his best performances of the season, but he has been inconsistent at best. He has not been, he's arguably been the worst of the top 4 picks so far out of his draft class. Bo Nix is potentially possibly rising up to the top spot above Jaden Daniels with the way that the season's going. And Drake May has had a pretty decent showing, even though he hasn't won many games in his first couple of starts. The Colts finally are starting to fall below 500. For a while, it was the dream team. The Colts were going to be making it to the playoffs. They're having a decent run. They are now 5-7. They've fallen a couple of games below 500, and it does not seem like their playoff chances are still alive anymore. They lost to the Lions 26-4 today, so it was a pretty hefty beatdown. Anthony Richardson, again, he's been wavering the entire season. He's been phenomenal some weeks. He's shown really great glimpses, but there have been other weeks where he has not been the guy. I think that Anthony Richardson has a lot of potential. I think that he'll be good next year. I think that the Colts just need to add some more pieces around him to really bring out the best of his game. The Cowboys and the Buccaneers both won this week. The Cowboys had a much more impressive victory over Washington, whereas the Buccaneers had a pretty okay game against the Giants. The Buccaneers won by a lot of points. They got Mike Evans back. That's a huge boost for them. If they beat somebody more legitimate next week, then they will be moving up further in the rankings. But for right now, one win against the Giants is not enough to bring them back into the top half. They beat the Giants 30-7, so it was a pretty good beatdown. Mike Evans most likely, unfortunately, will be losing his streak of 1,000-yard seasons. He's at about 400 yards right now, and he only has 6 more games left of the season, so he really needs to get 100 yards a game to keep that streak. So that's unfortunate because he has missed a lot of time this year. But with that being said, the Buccaneers are in a okay. They're having an okay year with all the injuries that they've had. And then the Cowboys had a good game against the divisional rival with Cooper Rush at quarterback. We saw some glimpses of Cooper Rush a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, Cooper Rush has not been the same player this year as he was the last time he played, but he did have a good game this week, which was something to be proud of. The Bengals are at 19. They were on bye this week, so they didn't move down at all. They need to win some games. They're at 4-7, but they are. It's a very impressive. It's not an impressive. No, there's no such thing as an impressive 4-7, but it's not really a shock. They've had a really difficult schedule. They've had an insanely tough year, and it's unfortunate that the season that Joe Burrow's having is aligning so poorly with the defensive struggles of this team right now. Moving on to the NFC West, we have the 49ers at 18, we have the Falcons at 17, we have the Cardinals at 16, the Seahawks at 15, and the Rams at 14. The Rams did lose this week, but so did everybody else here. And so with that being said, the Rams have stayed in their same position. The Seahawks did win over the Cardinals, but I think that the Rams still have a better team at this point in the year. Let's start off with the 49ers. The 49ers are 5-6. The 49ers are not the greatest team of all time. And they were great the last couple of years, but with the injury to Brock Purdy, with Christian McCaffrey being out half of the season, this team has been really up and down. It's been an unfortunate year for them. I think that if they do make the playoffs, they can still definitely be dangerous. I think that making the playoffs will be difficult, though, being a game behind in their division, having some really poor divisional matchups right now, and also with the NFC being so competitive, it'll be difficult even to get the 7th seed. I think that the 49ers really need to clutch up and win their division if they really want to make the playoffs. The Falcons were on bye this week. They did not play, but they're coming off of a couple of tough losses. They got demolished by the Broncos last week. The week before, they lost to the Saints. They are really falling down after their, I believe, 5-2 start. They are now 6-5, so they've won one of their last 4 games. They're not having a good showing right now, and all the other teams in this group are rising up. Except for the Cardinals. The Cardinals are also falling down. They've fallen down to 6-5 after a, I believe, 5-3 or 6-3 start. Arizona did lose this week to the Seattle Seahawks. I was expecting the Cardinals to win and get a really strong advantage in that division at 7-4. They were unable to do that. They did lose to Seattle. If they had won this week, they would have a 2-game advantage over everybody else, being 7-4. The rest of the division being 5-6. With their losses closed up a lot more with Seattle and the Cardinals both being 6-5. Arizona's played some really tough teams. They've had the hardest schedule in this grouping so far this season. I do think that they've had the most impressive season, but I'm giving it to Seattle with the tiebreaker. Seattle had a really strong start to the season. They haven't beaten anybody better than the teams in this group. But with that being said, they have had a solid year. Arizona has beaten somebody better than the teams in this group. They either beat Houston or the Packers. I forget which one, but they did beat somebody outside of this group. The Rams also did beat somebody outside of this group. They gave one of the losses to the Vikings, and then they also had another impressive win over, I believe, the Packers. So the Rams have beaten some teams outside of this group. That's why they're number one. They have the most potential. They are 5-6, but part of that's because of the injuries to Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua throughout the season. Kyron Williams has been a rock, and Matthew Stafford has had a really solid couple of games now that he's got all of his wide receivers back. Moving on to probably playoff teams, we got the Washington Commanders at 13, we got the Texans at 12, we got the Dolphins at 11, and we have the Broncos at 10. The Commanders had a poor showing this week against Cooper Rush and the Cowboys. The Cowboys have not been a phenomenal team this year, and with Cooper Rush at quarterback, it should have been an easy win for the Commanders to get back on track after the couple of losses. That is not the case. The Commanders did end up losing. They are now down to 7-5, and Jaden Daniels did not have a good passing performance. Jaden Daniels started off very strong, but he's not the one that punches it into the end zone. The red zone scoring for Washington is probably low compared to a lot of the other teams that are above 500. Jaden Daniels is really good at moving the football, and he can do a lot with his legs, but he really needs to improve his passing game over the offseason if they want to be serious contenders for next season. I think that Washington is most likely not going to be a serious contender with what I've seen from them this year. I think that it's a phenomenal season from Jaden Daniels as a rookie. I think that he's done a great job coming into this role and really taking on this team that's been very poor over the last couple of years. But at this point, it seems like it's not going to be Washington's year. Same thing with Houston. CJ Stroud in his second season, I was expecting more from him. I know that he's had a lot of injured wide receivers. He's had Nico Collins in and out of the lineup. Tank Dell has been healthy the whole year, but he's had Stephon Diggs in and out of the lineup, and the defense has not been great. With that being said, they should not be 7-5. They have a relatively easy schedule, and this week should have been an easy game for them to get back on track. Again, similar to Washington, it's a divisional game at home against the Titans, not a great team. They should have been able to get back on track. They were unable to do it. They are now 7-5 as well, and both of these teams are trending downward after their very strong starts. The Dolphins are at number 11. They're 4-6, either 4-6 or 5-6. They are trending upwards. Obviously, now that Tua is healthy. They've had an unfortunate season for the most part, but with Tua being healthy, they are one of the better teams in the league. They are 4-3 with a healthy Tua, but they've only lost to the Bills twice and the Cardinals, and then their wins were against some relatively respectable teams. I think that the Dolphins are actually better than both the Texans and the Commanders when fully healthy, and so I think that they're rising up in the rankings as those two are falling down. They're kind of passing at this moment, and I think that 11's a fair spot for Miami. At number 10, we have the Denver Broncos. The Broncos with Bo Nix are on a tear right now. They're also 7-5, but they're rising up. They start off, I believe, 2-4 or 1-3, and they have now won either 6 of their last 8 or 5 of their last 7 games. They've really improved over the course of the season. Bo Nix has really come into his own. He's the only quarterback in this year's draft class that has improved steadily throughout the season. Jaden Daniels has kind of remained the same. Caleb Williams had an okay start. He kind of had a little bit of a spike, and then he's kind of settled back into where he was. And then Drake May just doesn't have a large sample size of games, but Bo Nix has really come into his own throughout the season. The Broncos are having a really fantastic run right now, and I think that they're going to keep it up. Moving on to the strong contenders, we have the Chargers at 9, we have the Ravens at 8, we have the Packers at 7, we have the Steelers at 6. Chargers, you're finally back in the top 10. You did not play a game yet this week. You will be playing tomorrow against the Ravens. If you want to stay in the top 10, you need to beat the Ravens. I do not trust the Chargers. I don't see the Chargers as a top 10 team. The last couple of seasons, they haven't been a top 10 team, and then this year, they are 7-3, but it's one of the easiest 7-3s you'll ever see. They've lost to every team they're supposed to lose to. Their only impressive win was last week against the Bengals, and the Bengals only have 4 wins. So their most impressive win of the season was against a 4-7 team. With that being said, they still have Justin Herbert. They still have their defense is on a different level this year than it has been in other years. If the Chargers do lose the game tomorrow, they will probably move down below the Broncos. They'll stay in the top 10, but they'll be just below Denver. If they do win this week against the Ravens, then they'll probably move up to number 8. They won't move above Green Bay yet, but they'll move into the number 8 spot. As for the Ravens are also 7-4. Are 7-4. If they do lose to the Chargers, they'll move down to 9. These two will basically swap depending on what happens, but they won't move any lower than that. I'm a little biased towards the Ravens. I know they're losing some games. They're on a bit of a low streak, but I'm a huge fan of Derrick Henry. I think that Lamar Jackson is having a phenomenal season, and so I am a little biased towards the Ravens, but I do think the Ravens are a top 10 team. They'll finish off the season a top 10 team, even if they have some ups and downs here and there. The Packers are at 7, and the Steelers are at 6. The Steelers did lose this week to the Browns after their phenomenal win last week against the Ravens. I really thought that the Steelers were going to go on a phenomenal run after last week. I thought they were going to continue winning games. They may potentially be able to fight Kansas City for the 1 seed if they're able to beat them. But unfortunately, they won't be getting the 1 seed because they are now 2 games behind Kansas City, and their one matchup against them will not be enough to get into that position. They also have a much tougher schedule, so it'll be difficult for the Steelers to clinch that spot. With that being said, I do think that the Steelers have a strong team. I think this was a fluke game against the divisional rival, but they did move down out of the top 5. As for the Packers have been a steady top 10 team the whole season. They've been hovering between 5 and 10. I really love the way that Jordan Love plays football. I think that he is going to have a phenomenal career. I think that the Packers, with the schedule that they've had, have done very well. I think that 8-3 is a very strong start, and I think that Jordan Love has really come into his own this season. Last season was really when he started, was his breakout year. This year, now that he's broken out, has kind of been his year as okay, we're an established team. I'm an established quarterback. We're going to do what we need to do to win games, and that's what he's been able to do. It's been a little bit of a gunslinger style. He's had a lot of picks. He's looked like Brett Favre out there, but it's been a good season for the Packers. Finally, we have the NFL's elite. At number 5, we have the Minnesota Vikings. At number 4, we have the Philadelphia Eagles. At number 3, we have the Kansas City Chiefs. At 2, we have the Bills. And at number 1, we have the Detroit Lions. The Vikings almost lost to the Bears this week. They had a very close call. The Vikings have not looked as dominant as they were at the beginning of the season, but they're still 9-2. This week, Sam Darnold looked like the Sam Darnold that we saw towards the beginning of the year. I still don't think that Sam Darnold's a top 10 quarterback, but I think that he's playing well enough to win playoff games. This week they were against the Bears. Again, the Bears are not a playoff team, and they almost were able to come back and win the game. One thing I was shocked about was the fact that Justin Jefferson had such a poor game, but it does show that Sam Darnold's able to win the game by giving the ball to other guys like Addison and Hawkinson, and still have a very strong showing. The Eagles are at number 4 with their win this week over the Rams. The Eagles have ran the NFC this season. Even though the Lions are the number 1 seed, the Eagles have played all the tough teams. They're against the NFC North. They're against their own division with the Commanders and everyone else, right? And so the Eagles have really had a lot of the tough games, and they've been able to win those games with relative ease, right? And so I think that the Eagles are in a pretty strong position right now. I think that they're a very good 9-2 team, and I think that I underestimated them at the start of the year when they were 2-1. I thought that they were going to have a season similar to their end of the year last year, which was not too impressive. But they've proven me wrong time and again, and they now have finally earned their spot in the top 4. The Chiefs are number 3. The Kansas City Chiefs, as I've already mentioned, almost lost this week, but almost only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. They did not lose to the Carolina Panthers. They didn't even go to overtime. They did win in regulation, 30-27. It was a solid victory for the Chiefs, but it's not really what they want at this point in the season. They kind of want to be dominating these games. They're a 10-1 team or a 9-1 team, but they really don't look like it out there. And so it's so interesting how close these Kansas City games are. But they are able to clinch them up. The Bills were on bye this week, so they stayed at number 2. And at number 1, we have the Detroit Lions. They were able to stay where they were with a very handy win over the Indianapolis Colts. So overall, Very strong performance by the Lions. Not much to be said there. Jared Goff's kind of falling out of the MVP conversation just because his passing numbers have not been as good recently. But the MVP is so wide open now, with Jared Goff's stats being not as good, and Patrick Mahomes being terrible. Jalen Hurts could potentially be rising up as an MVP candidate at this point with how all of the other quarterbacks are kind of falling into place. So we'll see what happens with that, but thank you guys all for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new. I do power rankings on the channel every single week. I'll see you guys all in the next one. Peace.